You guys. Okay, good afternoon. I think Lisa explained what we're going to do. It's sort of billed as a conversation. And the idea is I ask them questions and they answer them to your entertainment and edification. So I'm just kind of a sort of catalyst or a ringmaster or whatever you want to see it as. So I thought I'd start actually asking Benjamin here, because Lisa's just had something to say, so now it's Benjamin's turn.
Happy to cede.
There's also a question I can ask Benjamin, I probably can't ask Lisa, and that is, you're a collector. You're known for all these things you've done, but you're also well known, certainly in certain areas, as a collector. So when did you first get this collecting bug? Were you born with it, or how did this materialize?
I was 6 years old. I had an uncle who was a great diamond dealer in Antwerp, an uncle in Paris who was a great diamond dealer, one in Australia, and one in Singapore. And my mom, who's exactly the size of Lisa, told her brothers that I was interested in stamps. So they would send all of these stamps, and on a monthly basis I got flooded with thousands of stamps from these 4 offices. And then I'd put them during Sunday, I'd put them in a tub, and then the stamps would rise off the envelopes, and then I would take the stamps, and I'd go into the living room, and there's my mom sitting next to me, and I'd be putting them in Scott's stamp catalogs. And month by month, the catalogs would fill up with the different stamps. And then also, if I had doubles or triples, I would go to the store, and I was quite small myself, and I would trade with the stamp dealers. So this Sunday Times and my mom sitting there like in Marcel Proust, it was just certain that I would become a collector.
Thank you. That's a nice answer. I won't ask you how old you were, Lisa, but I'll ask you a different question, and that is, your interest in collection, in some case, I think, was helped by Benjamin. Can you explain how this happened?
Yes, I can, actually. It was actually helped by much family, but I met Benjamin in 2007 when we started working on the first project that we did collaboratively, which was the Green Conference. And that was a pivotal moment because it was really marked IAC's deep commitment, coming out for deep commitment for sustainability and involvement with gold and so on and so forth. At any rate, Benjamin he has written several novels in which one of the central protagonists is a magnificent stone, such as the image you're seeing before you, and one of the books that he had written was titled Green, and I wanted to do a sort of polymorphous examination. So as the years have gone by, we have done a lot of projects together and become, I don't even know how to describe it, both friends, but he's an inspiration and all the rest of it. And I thought, okay, well, for one holiday season, I was going to issue a challenge, which is he has this fantastic collection of rings, amazing collection of rings, and I happen to be extraordinarily interested in contemporary work. And so I said, Benjamin, and I know of a man whose name is Seymour Rabinovich, and Seymour was a collector of broad-bladed slices. Now, I use that term specifically because they could be used for fish, ice cream, etc., a variety of purposes. It's not just a fish slice. And when Seymour, in essence, got done with the 18th century, which was his thing, he turned around and started commissioning all of these amazing metalsmiths, including enamelists like Harlan Butt, so on and so forth, to make broad-bladed slices for what is an absolutely extraordinary collection, a sizable portion of which is now at the V&A. So I thought, gee, wouldn't it be great to have Benjamin venture into the contemporary world? And so I wrapped up, and I'm a wrapping maniac. Presentation is a big deal for me. And so I wrapped up these 2 books on contemporary rings, and I went to see Benjamin. And there may have been a book on something else too, but I had a sort of hidden agenda. And I said, you know, this is for you. This is an idea I was thinking about for your collection. And he looked at me and he said, no, that's for you. You're the next generation. So that is a little story about how, my family had been interested in collecting. We live in a period where there's tremendous literature on it, but this is the direct connection between Benjamin and me and this situation, and why I'm sitting here about to talk to you about contemporary rings.
Thank you. Benjamin, behind you, or behind you both, is this large emerald.
We can also see it there.
You can see, yes, you can see it there. Now, the question I was going to ask you, which relates to this, I can't quite see why, is about what are your biggest regrets in collecting? And you're asked to show a slide of such a spectacular item that's just been on show in the Met for several months.
Right.
So how does this tie with regret?
Well, you know, I own this Taj Mahal emerald, and it's about the size of a 50-cent piece. And it's the way these 3 flower heads were cut was the surface was abraded around the flower heads. And the emerald is such a fragile object, and it was such an astonishing object to have been put in my hand. And when it was, I was just practically fainting. And I kept it for 15 years. And jaunty jolly, I'd go to the office. I was a Maharaja. This was a great, I owned what I considered, and what many considered, the greatest Mughal emerald in the world. And then I wrote a novel about it. I lectured in different places. I loaned it to different museums. But at a certain point, I sold it. And one of the books in the on sale is this Treasures from India. As Jack mentioned, a month ago, Altani, who's the great collector of Islamic and Indian art today, had some of his treasures on display in the Met. So I went there, and I looked, and there was the emerald in the case. And it was just I said to myself, why did I ever sell this? How could I do this? Its treasure goes through your hands. And then I said, wake up. For 15 years you were a Maharaja, and it's so crazy. But in a way, that was my biggest sadness.
Yeah. It's interesting that. No?
That's Altani.
That's it. So let's do that one. Oh, yeah. We worked on that one.
Okay.
So this somehow ties into the same theme, Lisa. Explain.
Yes, it does. This is, and first of all, I want to say one thing, which is I am highly cognizant of the fact that we have a lot of fabulous jewelers with us today, tomorrow. And so one of the things that I tried to do was really step around that in formulating my answers, and also to have Benjamin, as he is in this concept, be my guide in terms of how some of these answers are cast. But this is one of the things that I would say is a great regret. This is the work of Giovanni Carvaja. He is an absolutely extraordinary goldsmith, and technically astonishing. He sets himself challenges that are almost unthinkable. He wanted to create, if you will, gold fur. So this is like the golden fleece ring. It was what it's called. And if you look at the ombre effect of the gold, so the coloration actually changes if you look at that. His other work is beautiful too, and exploration of space and grid and all kinds of things. But I had an opportunity to acquire something at a very favorable price, which would have obviously been the only way I could do it. And I didn't do it. On the other hand, one of the things that is absolutely wonderful about living jewelers is that you know them, they continue to produce, you develop relationships, and you can learn from them and expand your horizons. So it may not always be a regret. Perhaps it's a deferred gift.
Thank you. Benjamin, talking about rings, collecting, what advice would you have for somebody today, a young person starting out? Presumably, would you say start on stamps or go straight into jewelry? What's your...
I would say scoot right into jewelry because, you know, the stamps, don't forget, they were made in multiples. And the beautiful thing about rings is I think that each one is slightly different. And I mean, prices have gone up incredibly, but at the same time, I think if you use your eye to get what's really beautiful, and you don't have to have a huge faceted sapphire, let's say, and you're willing to settle for cabochons, and for example, in this Art Nouveau ring, where the gold really melts into with the sapphires and with the diamonds, so you really do have a symphony of light and every time this ring is worn, depending on the angle, it looks quite different. So I think there's a possibility today to collect Art Nouveau, Art Deco, albeit with smaller stones.
Thank you. Lisa, how about you? What advice for the younger, or the even younger collector?
Okay, well, I chose this. This is Stephanie Albertson, and it's stacking rings. And they're absolutely luscious and beautiful, and the interaction between the color of the gold and the stones is smashing. Now, stacking rings, in a sense, have been around for a while in the sense of the, you know, the sort of traditional diamond band that gets added to the sapphire band or whatever. But as a concept, really, of a jewelry statement, Wendy Ramshaw maybe was kind of trailblazing in this. Whether this is going to, you know, remain central in the focus of the jewelry canon or not, who knows? It may be like Collier de Chien, which was wildly in favor, out of favor, will be maybe coming back into favor. But I think that the work of, so that's one thing, is questioning forms. The other thing is, again, that I do believe that the work of living artists, I mean, let's face it, everything is a risk. One is not, you know, to say, oh, well, you know, how can I know that I can redeem my money or whatever? You can't in anything that has an aesthetic value or what have you. You cannot have that certitude. But what you can know is that there is wonderful potential and promise in the work of people who are living and producing now. And so I guess I'm here as the voice of that spirit. And so this is the example I chose.
Thank you. Benjamin, you specialize in the works of dead jewelers, I suppose, rather than living jewelers.
Right.
So you mentioned earlier that prices have gone up quite a lot, obviously through the time in which you've been collecting. But you've collected on a very large scale. I mean, I know I've been privileged to see various bits of your collections, or collections, I think, probably a fair way of saying it. Is it possible on the scale? Is there still the material available today? Can you collect on the same sort of scale, do you think?
I think, again, even in like the world of rubies, where rubies have become hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars per carat, still the gold ring on the left, which, again, the red of the ruby is so highlighted by the gold, the stones are each under a carat. They're something like 3/4 of a carat. And something like that, a late 1800s mounting, is still quite affordable. And then there are pink sapphires. You know, not everything has to be a cashmere sapphire. And these pink sapphires, which are expensive today, but still nowhere near what the cashmere would be, or the Burma ruby, is very affordable, I think.
Yeah.
But the principal thing is that your eye is an amazing mechanism, and what looks beautiful to you, and when you look at the object that first instant, and if you trust your own judgment, over a period of time, I think you can be a very good collector.
Lisa, I know you've been trying to keep Benjamin focused on gold in this thing, away from colour, but in a sense you've chosen something which is very much coloured. Can
Yes,
you
I
explain
have.
why do you choose to show this piece at this moment?
Well, this is a ring by George Sawyer, and I think I think his polychrome Mokumegane work, also Shakudo and Kuramido, is extraordinary. And what he has done is to, in a very wonderful way, take traditional techniques, but this is a complete reinterpretation. This polychrome gold is an astonishing thing. And then look at the relationship between the movement of the fluidity of the red, the blue, the gold, etc., and then the kind of placement of these white, more linear geometric elements. So I picked this because I also think that one of the things that's really interesting is the transformation of traditional techniques, because let's face it, we all stand on each other's shoulders in every field, and the creation of contemporary expressions therefrom. And I think George's work is fabulous, and so I thought he should be here since he is in spirit, so he is now in visually.
Okay. So Benjamin, back to you. We've heard about your book, your novel, series of novels and jewelry. Now, in the old days, if you wanted to combine fiction with jewelry, you just read an auction catalogue. Now, you've sort of have parallel careers, if you like, but they overlap in an extraordinary way. I think it's unique. Can you explain a little bit about how the fiction interrelates with the collecting, how it works together?
Right. To start off with this Jewish wedding ring, which was the first ring I bought, and to speak again about the gold, when you look at the granulation on the edge of the ring, and then the twisted wire work as echoing and contrasting to the blue enamel, and that the lid opens up and the letters Mazal Tov are inside, wishing luck, of the ring. This was a fantastic object, but my feeling about the object started in my first day at Harvard Law School. I got this course on property law, and it was a total nightmare. I went back to my room, and my roommate, William Kane Riley, was a very wise but wacky guy. He said, "Oh, look," he said, "if you're so nervous, skip the next class. You've always wanted to write a novel. Why not start now?" So this was like real. And sure enough, for 1 year at Harvard Law School, I was sawing away on a novel. And I've always seen myself as a novelist. That was the big thing for me. When I couldn't, I tried to publish the novel, but in New York, they wanted me to change the ending. And, when you're 21 years old, you don't change one single word. You're a genius. So fast forward to 1969, I went to Sotheby, and I saw there were this collection of Renaissance rings and later rings of Gutman, and there was this Jewish wedding ring. And the great moments in my life have been so overpowering. And again, like with the Taj Mahal emerald, I saw this ring, and it was estimated for $2,500. And I had $10,000 in the bank. I was in the Greenwich Village, and I was trying to write my novel. And I thought to myself, I must have this ring. And in the end, I went to the auction waving the paddle, and I finally got the ring. And I was going to go through all my savings. So, I'm rational but passionate. So there, I get the ring, and over the years, I try to write the novel, and finally, after 35 years, in the year 2000, I managed to have a novel which was about the color blue. I, by that time, had become a collector and a dealer in gems. But I think one's life, if you really watch what you're doing and listen and look, it's all interrelated. I mean, the fact that we're in this audience tonight all together is very much a miracle.
Thank you. Lisa, I can understand what inspired you to show these.
Yes, I was following in the steps of my mentor Muse, and I thought it would be, I think these are actually quite, well, they're very bold statements. They do follow in the tradition of things like Jewish wedding rings. Benjamin actually has one ring where there are two white hands holding up a house. Many of his rings have become sort of psychic icons for me. And I thought it would be very interesting to once again look at how this tradition is interpreted today. So what I'm showing you on the left is Esther Davies, well, actually, it's my right, your right, okay. Esther Davies, it's untitled, but clearly it is a structure on a ring. And then the other one is Vicki Amberg Smith, Olomouc Synagogue from 2004. And both incredible architectural expressions of gold bound up with spiritual or thoughtful messages. And so that's why I chose them.
Thank you.
And in homage to Benjamin.
This is the cover. This is a plug for the book. He's working his way through the rainbow, but this is the cover of Blue. You wanted to say something about the stone, I think, here, didn't you?
Yes. This was a star sapphire that someone came to my office with, and my dad, who never went beyond the 4th grade, I saw the star sapphire, and I said to my father, this was like the first year I got into business. I said, this is better than the Star of India. So he said, what's the Star of India? So I explained the museum and so forth. And he said, we should buy it. And we did. And then I loaned it to the American Museum of Natural History for many years. And again, the novel Blue is based on that star, this depth of blue. And every other page is a picture of either a gem I've handled or a work of art. And then on the other side is this love story set in the village. And it's the blue in Vermeer's paintings, it's the blue in the sapphire, it's the blues. And I've been able to mix the jewelry and my own experiences and my love of art with what really happened to me. And basically, this 70% of the novel is things that I wish had happened but never did. But you can write a novel and everything comes out great. So that's the novel. And the written text is like a page of the Talmud where the center is the story. And then around the edges are characters like Dylan or like Vermeer or like Heidegger. And they're commenting on what is happening. And it's the only novel that's written like this, and it's the only novel that's half art and half writing.
Thank you. It's a fascinating book. Well, they're fascinating books. Lisa, from writing on jewelry, this is, I suppose, the ultimate example of writing on jewelry, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I'm obviously very involved with text and words, and also have lived my entire life surrounded by visual culture. And I'm very drawn to the idea of the poesy ring or the ring with significant inscription, but also when you have beautiful work to which it is married, it's an enormous enhancement. And these are a pair of rings by Anne Jeanette Lamech, I can barely read my writing, Sidanog, and they are his and hers. And the inscriptions are in both Latin and English. They're from Psalm 96, and his says, let heaven rejoice, and hers, the slimmer one, of course, or perhaps not, of course, but it is, let earth be glad. And this also took me back to a historical thing that I have always found very moving, which is Paul Revere's wedding ring for his wife, which is inscribed, live contented. Now, that's a very simple ring, just a band. Here we have some, quite wonderful work, as well as these very meaningful inscriptions.
Lisa, a moment ago, you mentioned that buying sort of contemporary jewelry, living art, in a sense, is a gamble. So, Benjamin, thinking of gambling, you could say all collecting is gambling, really, but you're an enthusiast, obviously. I mean, could I poker against you? I mean, do you have a good poker face when you're buying? If you're offered this wonderful thing, does it show? I mean, do you sort of wag your tail, as it were?
Well, I would answer the question with a question, because in if we go to the next slide, in 1975, you were buying and selling jewels. And I remember going into your London store, and you would show me rings, such as this one, and you would quote a price, would be in the few £1,000s at that time, if that. And I remember sitting there and just jumping and saying to you, well, that price is too cheap. Why? And then you said, well, I mean, it's not a ruby, these are garnets. And you explained to me that the reason that those garnets were cut in that way, in pyramidal fashion, was to mimic the uncut diamond crystals. So I got you to raise the price because I felt more comfortable. And you, who were somewhat a fish out of water, we were both, in my opinion, one of the few gentlemen in that secondhand jewelry trade. You soon to leave. I stayed. But all these things I bought from you over the years, I don't think a poker face is great. I think, first of all, you had the ring, and you were proud of having bought it. So the fact that I'd say, oh, this is great, maybe I would have saved a little money at the beginning, but in the long run, I wouldn't have seen as much. And in any way, I couldn't hide my excitement. And it was, when I think that half of the rings that I bought on this sheet of paper that was in all your brochures, half of these rings came from Jack in the 12 years that he was trading in jewelry.
Thank you. Lisa, you've chosen to show this piece.
I did.
Is this something to do with the poker face?
It does in a way. I probably don't have a great poker face because, as is probably evident to you all, I tend to speak with great sincerity, and also I'm very enthusiastic. On the other hand, one has to be realistic. And when you are starting out, and perhaps always depending on either your purse, your budget, purse budget, or psyche, etc., price is a concern. This ring is the stone, well, it's a Munsteiner ring. The stone was actually cut by Bernd himself, which meant a great deal to me. And the depth of color and the marriage of the color with the gold and then this sort of startling white accent. At any rate, I thought it was a wonderful ring, but it was an estate piece. And often, if you come across an estate piece, it represents a great opportunity for value. And, if you're starting out and you want to build a great collection, that's one of the things to look for is, without having to, in a sense, negotiate with someone who may be one of your closest friends. But on the other hand, the reality is that asking doesn't hurt, but poker face, probably not.
Thank you. Benjamin, we talked about inscriptions on rings. This is a piece that has particular interest because of the inscription on it. Can you say a little bit more about this?
Sure. Again, on this brochure, you can also see it in detail. And the back of it says, I was in London and shown this hairpin, and on the back, it had been a ring that Charles II gave to Nell Gwyn. She was 16 years old selling apples outside of an opera, and he was 20 years older than her and the king. And he fell madly in love with her, and she was his principal mistress for many, many years. And when he died, he said, please help poor Nell. And they had 2 children together, and they were named the Dukes of St. Albans. And through 7 generations of the Dukes, the ring passed down, and then it was eventually the 4th Duke had it made into a hairpin. So the idea that I had in my hand something that Charles II, always a romantic figure to me, and the diamond in the center came from India and is a very, very bright, very high-colored D stone. So by daytime, I was and have been, and still today, sell diamonds for engagement rings and colored stones. But by night, I was always dreaming of these rings that were the history of ruby, sapphire, emerald, and diamond. But there was one little problem, and it was so costly that I couldn't very well say, oh, that's too cheap, because it was way beyond what I had. But I had the old idea of you could swap. And so I was able to swap a Renaissance piece, a jewel, that the dealer wanted to get back because he had another customer, and that customer knew that I had bought the Renaissance jewel, and so it would help him. So I was able to move the pieces around, and you can see this piece in the Metropolitan Museum of Art this coming Monday for, I think there's going to be about 4 months of a show called Treasures from the Deccan. And that's where the Golconda mines are. And so they have manuscripts as well as some jewels. And there's nothing more beautiful. These rings look great in your hand, but if they're in a museum case, they're heaven itself. And I'm very, very curious to see how it's displayed. It's at the Met.
Well, that brings us to a sort of a topic of sort of provenance, the background to pieces, because that has a perfect back through the Dukes. So you mean you've been a Mughal emperor, and now you've been a Duke of St. Albans. So you're living the life. For you, when you're trying to approach contemporary jewelry, how important is sort of provenance and that side to you?
Well, I think provenance is really important, but I also think that there are other issues that are also extremely important. And I'm deliberately skirting around the issue of ethically sourced gold because we have a major panel on that tomorrow. But as you can tell, obviously, from this program, transparency, responsible sourcing, et cetera, are extremely important to me and a great moment to IEC. But this ring, which is Fritz Kause, and it's called Coda from 2005. And the thing that first of all, it's visually stunning. But the other thing is, it has coral in it. Coral is a minefield. Can he date when he found that piece of coral? Is that piece of coral tradable, not tradable? Can it go in? Can it go out? What have you? So, on the one hand, you've got this absolutely stunning artifact, and on the other hand, some of the pivotal issues of our time, and so that was the reason that I selected this, and it also relates to a couple rings that Benjamin will be talking about next, an issue of provenance and dating. And then the other thing is, of course, that with respect to provenance, if you've bought a ring from the artist, or if the ring has come from somebody who was deeply committed to a particular endeavor. So a great collector would be, say, Helen Drutt, for example, although most of her collection is now in Houston. But provenance always is a good thing. And when you're dealing with living artists, the ability to have actually interacted with them, talked with them, developed a relationship, etc., and have that inform your eye, your purchase, and hopefully what moves you, is definitely an aspect of provenance.
Something else that's inscribed, Benjamin. Can you explain what we're looking at here?
Yes, it's another Charles II ring, and it gives the date of his death and his portrait under crystal. And again, one ring can often lead to another, because once I got the Botkin, the hairpiece, then I got very interested in Nell Gwyn, and I got very interested in Charles II. And so then suddenly these rings that relate pop up before you. And your mind is always thinking. It's again like the stamps. Oh, if only I had some more things about Charles II. And if I have Charles VIII, then how about Charles I? So one thing leads to another, but you also learn a heck of a lot.
So where does this fit in?
Well, this is the seller swap question. And instead of, and what I chose to do was pick something glorious. This is Kent Rabley. It's the clam ring, clamshell, clam ring. I'm sorry about that, but it's clam. And I mean, look at this fabulous visual statement with the open shell and then this wonderful ring inside. This ring will never be mine. It may be part of the AJDC collection, or it may be Kent's, but it is a glorious statement in gold. It's another one that takes a traditional technique and this granulation and manifests it in just an extraordinary way. And the form is very sculptural. And then you have the reflection of the inner ring in the inner rim of the outer ring. So the reason I selected something aspirational was because I think that swapping is a really good idea. The reason to swap is to have something that, as you have grown in terms of your connoisseurship or your knowledge or your tastes, what have you, it's always worth exploring those possibilities. And I think it's an important way of evolving. So instead of, I just showed an object of desire.
And I mean, I look at that, and I think that fundamentally the reason why people love gold is that if you're a guy, as a broad statement, you think, oh boy, pirate's treasure, if only I can find the cave that has the treasure. And I've seen so often young girls who walk around with these crowns. And, you know, this image of royalty, like you say, I was Maharaja for X number of times, and this gold that opens up really makes you feel royal, and that's what underlies this tremendous desire for it.
Okay. So, obviously you're passionate about collecting and this whole subject. What piece, well, I mean, I know the answer because it's the next slide, but what made you choose this as the sort of the epitome of your sort of passion, that sums up your passion in rings?
Well, the rough diamond, my grandfather had been a rabbi and a dealer in uncut diamonds. I love always to try to figure out how do things really start. And this ring is the earliest, I would say, very important diamond ring. It's from the 4th century. And again, you can see it on this sheet. And it's fascinating. And of course, who did I get it from? This passed through Jack's hands. I think we worked out in 1977. The chances are that, again, there would be the picture. He had found it. We're here. I see it as a woman holding up the side view, an offering. and a very cyclotic type figure. And then on the other side is that Roman adamas, the unconquerable, that strength. And so when I bought it, over the years, I would always try to loan it out to museums, because if something goes into a museum, people see it and then they think about it and they say, oh, I have a theory about it. So when it went to the Bruce Museum 10 years ago, I asked Jack if he would write an essay about how he knows that, in fact, it's 4th century. And he gave a speech at the Bruce Museum, and he figured out, which is amazing to me, that the weight is of 2 Constantine coins. So that's really smart. And it's like put the piece together. So over the years, and then he also found out that it came from the de Klerk collection from 1911. So that makes it that it's before 1971, and it wasn't just taken out, God forbid, out of the ground today, and you could be sued, and you'd have to return it, and so forth. So it's really a piece that's traveled through time. So in this case, the provenance and the fact that it's so majestic, and I still think it'll have another iteration, because I think that crisscrossed gold figures are 2 lovers that are intertwined. But as many times as I've tried to convince scholars of this, they always just give me that weak smile and they say, oh, that's interesting. And they change the subject. It's very frightening. But being an obsessive, I'm still going to try that scholar. And I haven't been able to, and Jack said, well, that's interesting. So, but I'm still hoping.
Yes, it's true. Hang on, this way. So this, I think, sums up a lot for you, doesn't it? In many ways.
Yes, it does. I actually do own this ring. And this ring does, in many, many ways, best sum up, for me, the passion and interest, with one exception, and that is that the maker is no longer living. However, this piece is very sculptural, very bold, can be seen as a ram's horn. Somebody else I was speaking with saw it as a calla lily. I wear this every day on this hand. And when I was 15, we were in Greece. It was my mother's birthday, and I was present. My father bought this for my mother, and she knew I admired it. And for my first Mother's Day, as a mother, when I went to bed, it was behind my pillow. And that was so intensely meaningful for me. Now, the fact that it's meaningful for me is, I guess, nice, but it is linked to a larger point, which is that the associational value of jewelry. We heard earlier, for example, about gifting and so on and so forth. The experiences, the rituals, the moments in life, the associations that these precious objects prompt. Even though, for example, I have seen one other of these rings, this particular ring can never be replicated because it carries with it all the history, all the associations. So from my point of view, looking at something like this, I see head, which is the intellectual composition and conception of it. I see heart, which is the hand that wrought this out of 22-karat gold, and the warmth of the gold is wonderful. And I see soul, which is the legacy and the history behind the piece. And I think for many people, those are important components of objects that they treasure. And I hope that anybody who's thinking about collecting thinks that those are, things that they would like to have associated with things that perhaps they might come to own. So that is the reason I chose this, and it is deeply personal.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll ask the question now of Benjamin. What would you consider to be your greatest discovery? I mean, what is the greatest discovery that you've made?
I would say that the most healthy answer would be the next discovery. I wouldn't say that I would make, that sounds patronizing, but that we would make. And, 12 years ago, Jack and I were talking about doing a history of diamond cutting, of the story of Indian diamonds. So we exchanged our ideas, and then I did this brochure. So, we're fast workers, so 12 years later, Elihu Yale, the book about the founding of Yale University and how Elihu Yale made his fortune in the diamond trade and was an obsessive buyer of works of art, comes out. And Jack, I think within a year, his book's going to come out, and published by Yale University Press. So the next project that I think we could do together and would involve another discovery of a ring somewhere would be showing the progression of diamond cutting from this kind of pyramid cut, which is in a Venetian ring from the late 1500s, and including a rose-cut diamond. And in the process of doing the book, and what happens if it takes 12 more years? I mean, it's fantastic to be able to do a book. While you're doing a book, you think it's going to be perfect, and it's great. So I would say that's the most important discovery.
When did you discover this as a feeling?
Right.
How about you?
I wouldn't say this is the greatest discovery, but what I would say is that it's incredibly interesting and iconic, because what this is it is the Kretschmer tension setting, but it's the fancy 8 version. And often the Kretschmer rings are platinum and the diamonds are round. And here you have yellow gold with a baguette or
Emerald cut.
an emerald cut stone baguette. I mean, this obviously it's more like a souffle than a baguette. And so things like this that are sort of extraordinary takes on things that are iconic, I think are quite fascinating and well worth giving a thought to. But at the same time, one of my favorite lines of poetry is "Surprise me on some ordinary day with a blessing gratuitous," which is John Berryman. And so I always wait with anticipation to be surprised by the beautiful thing that I cannot anticipate and that comes my way.
Yeah. So this, I think, is our last picture we've got. And you wanted to show this one, Benjamin, because I was going to ask a question. I don't know if it relates to this, but it's a sort of general question, and that is that you're a collector, but like several collectors, you wouldn't like the idea of buying a collection. Why is that? What is the feeling behind this?
Because I think the collection, buying a collection, the idea is to buy individual pieces and then somehow coalesce them so that you make your own collection. And, one of the wonderful things today is you can, for example, I've looked at the Jewish bride for many, many years, and the hand of the husband is resting on the hand of the wife, and you can see there's a ring, a diamond ring on her hand. So in the last 10 years, there have been fantastic ways to know what's under the different pigments. So I can see this ring, which is a rose cut that I had loaned, my family had loaned to Yale University. It'd been there for like 10, 15 years. And then Jack came up and said, "Oh, this is really interesting, and this fits into the book." With the new skills of photography and the new skills of analyzing paintings, I think that all of this can come together in a new collection, a new book, and a new way of looking.
How do you sum up collecting, and your feeling on this? Where we've come to, Benjamin's explained where he thinks it's going, the buying of collections. How do you feel about collecting?
Well-
what are your sort of final words? 'Cause we need to...
Golly gee, as we say. First of all, I'd like to say that I agree with Benjamin about selecting items from extant collections and not buying collections wholesale, whole suit, because I do think that the choices should reflect you and what it is that you want and what it is that you're trying to put together. And often, when one has to purchase a whole collection, then one is faced with things that one might wish to get rid of, pardon me, the bluntness of that statement, and it might be quite challenging to do that. So I would agree with Benjamin. I would favor the selection of objects, if that was possible, over a wholesale acquisition of another collection. How I sum up collecting? With respect to, now, I'm very interested in painting, and a lot of the artists that interest me are, my mother calls them dead artists, and she's a living artist. But for me, one of the great adventures of collecting is seeing the new, talking with the artist, talking with the person what is their intent in creating, learning about process, learning about technique, learning about what are the components of that piece. And then, why does it sweep you away so? Because the reality is that you can see 10 things that are roughly the same, but they're not exactly the same. It's like Ruskin's variety and uniformity. And so I think honing your eye, building relationships, the counsel, and ultimately putting something together that's an original agglomeration are the most rewarding things. And I would urge everybody to be true to their own vision, which doesn't mean don't learn. Learning is critical, and don't train your eye. Training your eye is critical. But I think that the abundant talent that is alive today is a wonderful opportunity to build a great collection and to learn a tremendous amount whilst doing it. And of course, rings are some of the most emotionally laden and historically important objects, and so not a bad thing to focus on. And all of this goes by way of saying that I did this because I have so much respect and admiration for Benjamin, and he posed the challenge. So I hope that I have done him proud in what has been presented to you. And I have very carefully not shown the work of artists whose work is going to be shown, and I've shied away from some of the issues that will be central foci of other conversations. But, there is something in human beings, many human beings, not all, but that is a collecting impulse, whatever it may be. And for whatever reason that is there, it can be a great adventure and lead you to meet wonderful people and experience moments that you never would have envisioned before. And so that, I guess, is what I would have to say.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask Benjamin one last question.
Okay.
Lisa's explained the ring she wears, her mother's ring that she wears all the time. Except in the privacy of your own home when you're sort of wearing a ring to pretend you're a Maharaja. Have you ever worn any of the rings in your collection?
No, and I don't know why, but this is the future. I'm hoping, I guess, Diana Scarisbrick, who wrote the book, sometimes she comes, when I go visit her house, she'll have like 4 or 5 rings on each hand. So maybe that's
the next stage in collecting.
Right.
Thank you very much indeed. So a big hand for, thank you very much.
So, everyone, we will see you at Aaron Faber, Living Artists. Lot to celebrate. It's Faber's. We are also celebrating Faber's 40th anniversary and the 5th anniversary of this conference. We thank you all for being here. We'll have fun tonight, And all of this wonderful energy will continue tomorrow, when we'll be hearing from some fantastic jewelers. Again. Thank you, because I really want to, I took this very seriously.
I know. And we didn't over-prepare. I thought it was great. Each stage was, it made it better and better. Yeah, no,
I expected that. I'm good on my feet. It's just
Yeah.
that, I wanted this to be, my answers to be thoughtful, and the objects selected to be